Boldwood presents The Bad Boy, written by Gillian Godden and read by Simon Mattox. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Mixed Emotions.
Where the hell is he, Knuckles? He knows what time he's supposed to be here.
Quickly glancing at her watch, Scarlet muttered under her breath to the man stood beside her and cast him a sideways glance. The casual shrugging of his shoulders didn't help her mood, and anger burned inside her.
He knows what time the ceremony is. I told him myself. I'll wring his bloody neck.
It's only 8:50 a.m. He's got 10 minutes yet, Knuckles whispered.
OK, you might have got a smartwatch for Christmas, but that doesn't make you smart or able to tell the time,
Scarlet snapped. Standing in the church full of people, she furtively looked around for any sign of Adam, her younger brother and business partner. Adjusting her large dark glasses, she looked at the coffin at the front, surrounded by flowers and photos.
Hope there's room in there for him, and you too if you keep looking at that bloody watch.
Alexa, Knuckles whispered. She tells me everything.
He nodded, tapping the screen of his watch. Angry at Adam's absence at the funeral and Knuckles' offhand comments about his newfound digital world, Scarlet felt her face flush.
Well, I hope she's told you I'm pissed off, she snapped again, trying hard not to raise her voice for others nearby to hear her conversation. She looked around at people she knew and smiled graciously to show that nothing appeared to be wrong. The pew she was in had started to fill up, but she'd left her large handbag beside her on the seat so Adam could sit next to her.
Toilet break, said Knuckles,
and he started to sidle past her.
What, now? Why didn't you go before we got here? There are no toilets in here. It's a bloody church.
Outside. I'll look.
Oh, go and piss up a tree or something. It wouldn't be the first time. God, what a day. Adam doesn't turn up, and you're doing a disappearing act. Don't be long, she called after him.
The sombre surroundings gave her the creeps, as everyone greeted her before they took their seats for the funeral. She had been to far too many funerals in the past. Lastly, but not least, her own parents. Mournful music softly filled the church as the vicar walked towards the family at the front and spoke to them soothingly. Scarlet looked at the coffin and then towards the mourners who were desperately trying to fight back the tears and felt a lump rise in her own throat. Casting her eyes around the church, she found it hard to recognise anyone. Everyone looked exactly the same, dressed in their black clothing, including herself. Today she wore a black two-piece skirt suit, with only her pearl earrings and necklace as accessories. Her blonde hair was in a chignon instead of flowing down her back towards her waist. It wasn't a fashion parade, after all. Her mind wandered to her own family. Her beloved father, Tony Lambrianu, had been accidentally shot in his own nightclub by some drunk arguing with his girlfriend while pointing a gun at her. Scarlet's mother, Francesca, had been standing nearby, and when the gun had swung in her direction, her father had jumped in front of her to save her, getting himself shot in the process. That had been one of the saddest days in Scarlet's entire life. She'd loved her father, worshipped him even, and missed him every day. Although her mother had died years later of an aneurysm and stroke, they all knew Francesca had truly died years before from a broken heart. It was as though she had waited until Adam had turned 18 and was not a child anymore before finally reuniting once more with her own beloved Tony. Scarlet wondered what it must feel like to be loved that much. Her own marriage had been a farce. Tony Lambrianu and his brother Jake had run Gangland London with their friend and business associate Ralph Gold. With Ralph's connections with Don Carlos, the head of the mafia in Italy, they had ruled the world. When Tony had died, it had become Scarlet's place to keep his memory alive and run the family business. Katie, Scarlet's twin sister, had married a member of Don Carlos's firm, Chris, and since Don Carlos's unfortunate death, Chris had become the new Don. Together, Chris and Katie lived in Italy on the family's vineyard, which continued to thrive under Chris and Katie's watchful eyes. She missed her sister, but they saw each other often. Sometimes it was quicker to fly to Italy than it was to travel up the M25, she mused. Scarlet now ran the family business with her younger brother, Adam. 18 years younger than her, he'd started by mopping floors and working the bar in their nightclub. He had moaned about it, but she had insisted that, like their father, he knew everything about the business before he took it over. Now, in his late 20s, Scarlet had to admit that Adam was a good businessman.
but she felt he was reckless sometimes. Julie Gold, otherwise known as Auntie Julie, and who'd been a close friend to both of her parents, was still very much alive, although she never admitted her age, and no one could guess it because she'd had so much Botox and plastic surgery that Scarlet thought she looked younger than herself sometimes. There was no way Julie Gold was going to age gracefully. The thought of Julie brought a smile to Scarlet's face and almost made her laugh. She had never changed, and was still full of one-line quips to make you squirm and laugh. When Scarlet had complained about Adam's reckless, womanizing ways, Julie had just laughed and said she had known the original Playboy Tony, and what did she expect his son to be like? It was in the genes. Glancing at her watch again, Scarlet pursed her lips. Each time the church door opened, she expected Adam to breeze in with that smile that could charm the knickers off a nun. He had his father's sapphire blue eyes, the same as her own, but he had their mother's auburn. Breaking into her thoughts, Knuckles returned to his seat beside her. "Where the hell have you been? You've been gone ages, and you're all hot and sweaty. On the other hand, don't tell me, I don't want to know." He shrugged. "It was rushing." "Why? You incontinent or something? Hope you've washed your hands. Adam still hasn't turned up. Thank God the ceremony has been delayed a while because people are still coming in," she snapped. Knuckles, as usual, remained expressionless at Scarlet's rant. He had started off as a leg breaker and a street soldier for her father until she had requested for him to drive her. He quickly became her full-time driver and bodyguard, constantly at her side. Knuckles was nearly 7 foot tall and almost as wide. There wasn't an ounce of fat on him, and he worked out 2 or 3 times a day. He had lost his hand in some fight or another and had it replaced by a prosthetic hand, which years ago had been rough and ready, but these days was almost bionic, and people often struggled to tell the difference until they felt his powerful, vice-like grip. He rarely spoke or showed emotion, and although he took everything in, he never gave an opinion. In the earlier days, Julie Gold had called him Shrek because of his looks and height. But when Scarlet had been at a very low ebb and depressed after her divorce from her disastrous marriage, she had found solace within those big, strong arms. Fondly now, she thought of her own children, her twins, who had been the product of that liaison. And to her surprise, Knuckles was an excellent father, much more so than she could have imagined. He had also been an excellent father to Adam when he'd been orphaned. Knuckles had taken Adam under his wing and looked after him like a younger brother. The vicar started to speak, and her heart sank. Turning to take one last look at the closed church doors, she let out a deep sigh and faced the front. "Got any change, mister?" The homeless vagrant sat on London Bridge with his back to the wall and shook his polystyrene cup, stained with dregs of tea and filled with just a few measly coins, towards people quickening their pace and ignoring him as though he were invisible. His grey, shabby overcoat was wrapped firmly around him, covering the layers of clothing he wore underneath to keep out the cold. His knitted, soiled hat, pulled way down and covering his eyebrows, failed to hide the lank grey hair at the sides of his head that matched his grey beard. Again, he waved his cup in the air at the busy office workers rushing past with their briefcases. Coughing loudly and holding up his fist to his mouth, he spat phlegm on the pavement to clear his throat. His tired eyes watched the disgust of passers-by as they muttered expletives and widened the gap between themselves and him. He stretched out his legs and spied a man hurrying towards him, engrossed in a conversation on his mobile phone. He was the typical city worker, dressed in a dark suit and tie and flowing overcoat, and knew he would throw some spare change at him, out of annoyance or guilt, maybe. The man always seemed to be in a rush to get to work, and he always had his mobile phone glued to his ear. The vagrant watched him intently. This was his victim. Blindly rushing with the crowds, elbow to elbow on this busy morning over London Bridge, the young office worker tripped over the homeless man's legs. Embarrassed, he lay sprawled on the floor, face down, wincing in pain. "Sorry, mister. Do you need a hand?" The vagrant began to ease himself up onto his knees to help, and proffered his soiled, woolen-gloved hand to help him up. "I'm fine, you prick. Why on earth are you sitting here on a busy Monday morning sticking out your legs? I'd sue you if I thought you had anything," the man spat out. "Sorry, son. No offence. I just wanted a cup of coffee or something. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I hope your mobile phone is okay." Instantly, the suited man raised his head and looked around the pavement. No one had stopped to offer assistance. If anything, he had almost been trampled underfoot, along with shouts for him to get out of the way. Scrambling forward, he spotted his mobile as it was kicked by a passer-by. His heart sank, already suspecting the screen would be broken. Reaching across people, stumbling over him, he grabbed his mobile and almost kissed it. But looking at it closely, he could already see he was right. It had been stood on and kicked about, and he realised he was going to have to spend the rest of the day sorting it out. The vagrant, who had now stood up behind the man on his knees, checking his phone, pushed the suited man's briefcase and kicked it hard through the crowd to the other end of the pavement. He then carried on assisting the suited man. "Sorry, mister. Let me help you up. How's your phone?" "It's bloody broken. What do you think? You people are a public nuisance. Why don't you just stand on a corner and sell the Big Issue or something?" Irritated and annoyed, the suited man tried switching his mobile on, praying to God it would burst into life. "Can't afford it, mister. You have to buy 'em to sell 'em." The homeless man reached out his arm to help the suited man up, and saw the man grimace at the soiled woolen glove. But he accepted his help nonetheless, brushing the dust and dirt from the pavement. The vagrant glanced behind him and saw the briefcase now almost hidden in the crowd. "You okay otherwise, mister?" Looking around, he pointed across the pavement. "Is it your briefcase?" Forgetting that when he'd fallen, he'd been holding his laptop case, the suited man looked around and his heart sank again. He could already feel his knees burning from where he'd possibly scraped them on the pavement during his fall. His hand was bleeding and his ego had taken a thrashing. What a horrible day this had started out as, and it had begun to rain, which made everyone walk even faster. "Fuck! My briefcase! It has my laptop in it!" Panicking, the man pushed his way through the crowd. "Oh, Christ! Look at my bag!" The man almost felt like crying. Just going by the dusty, battered case, he knew it was broken. Shoving his mobile into the inside pocket of his coat, he adjusted his tie and started to walk forward. "I'm not even going to look inside it. My nerves can't stand it. This is your fault, you stupid tramp," he shouted, while rolling up his coat collar to shield him from the rain. "Hey, mister, you got any spare change for that drink?" The vagrant held out his hand and waited. "It's not my fault you office lot are always rushing around, not looking where you're going. Go on, mister. I have tried to help you." The suited man let out a deep sigh. "Do you realise the trouble you've caused me? You sit there, trip me up, break my bloody phone, possibly my laptop, and now you ask me for money." Without thinking, the suited man swung his leg back and kicked the homeless man, making him wince in pain. "Hey, mister, it's not me who's the liability here. If you weren't so busy talking on your phone while walking, you would have seen me. Then you wouldn't have fallen over me. What about my injuries?" he whined. "That's assault. Even us homeless have rights," he said, rubbing his leg. Red-faced and flustered, the suited man reached into his pocket and looked at the meagre change in his hand. "Here, take it, take the bloody lot. Anyway, we'll probably be meeting again if my boss realises how late I am and sacks me. Now, just piss off." He threw his change into the air. It made a chinking sound as it fell down on the pavement, and he rushed off and joined the jostling crowds walking towards the tube station. The vagrant waited and watched while the suited man disappeared into the crowds. Then he began picking up his soiled carrier bags and walked in the opposite direction along the pavement, leaving the loose change scattered on the floor. Looking past the crowds, he saw the council road maintenance van at the curbside with its hazard lights flashing. He hurried to it and climbed into the back. As it drove off, the man quickly stripped himself of his clothing and fake grey beard. "Oh, fuck! The glue on this beard hurts. It's nearly pulling my chin off." Reaching into his bag, Adam took out a packet of wet wipes and washed his face. Once he'd finished, the driver of the van pulled over and let him out on a quiet street, wearing just his boxer shorts. The driver smiled, then, doing a three-point turn, drove away in the opposite direction. Running down the road, Adam saw his beloved motorbike. Draped over it was his helmet and his leather trousers and jacket. Looking at his watch, he cursed himself. Today had taken longer than he'd expected, and he knew Scarlet would be boiling mad. Donning his black helmet, he smiled to himself, jumped on his motorbike, and roared away. Arriving at the cemetery, he took a sigh of relief. Everyone was coming out of the church and following the coffin to its plot before it was lowered. He was late, but not that late. Hearing the roar of the engine, members of the congregation turned and looked at the black motorbike, almost skidding to a stop. Scarlet lowered her dark glasses as she looked at her younger brother. "If he'd driven any closer to this plot, he'd have fallen into that hole," she snapped. "He's here," whispered Knuckles, shrugging. "Yes, and what a bloody entrance!" The vicar stopped speaking and waited as Adam walked towards them and stood beside Scarlet and Knuckles. "Sorry, everyone. London traffic." Taking off his helmet, he shook his head, letting his wavy auburn hair fall back into place and smiling charmingly at the crowd. "Take that bloody biker jacket off and show some respect," Scarlet spat, while trying not to cause a fuss. Casting her a sideways glance, he whispered, "I can't. I've got nothing underneath it. Now be quiet, the vicar's waiting, and it's freezing." "Off!" she demanded, through gritted teeth, clearly not believing him for 1 minute. Grinning, Adam nodded. "Fair enough." Flashing a row of perfect teeth towards the waiting crowd, especially the ladies, Adam slowly unzipped his black biker jacket before taking it off, showing only a tight black vest underneath. Adam flexed his muscly arms for added measure. Knuckles undid his black tie and handed it to him. Mischievously, Adam put the tie around his bare, sun-tanned neck and stood there. People started to smile back and stifle their laughter behind their hands, while Scarlet flashed an angry glance at him. "Fucking clown," she snapped. Adam looked up at the crowd and held out his hands apologetically. "My apologies, everyone. Please, carry on, and let us lay this beautiful, strong woman to rest. I know she would forgive my attire. That is the kind of woman she was," he said, while wiping away an invisible tear for good measure. Instantly he could see his boyish charm had won them over, and if anything they scowled at Scarlet, who'd made such a fuss, making her blush slightly. Once the funeral ceremony had resumed, they all stood paying their respects and shaking hands while agreeing to meet at the wake. After everyone had moved on, Adam, who was slightly shivering by now, picked up his jacket and put it back on. "I'll meet you at the wake, Scarlet. Promise." Cheekily, he kissed her on the cheek and walked away. Revving up his motorbike, he shook his flyaway hair before donning his helmet and riding off in a cloud of smoke while waving at everyone. Scarlet got back into her waiting car with Knuckles, who was driving. "He's such a vain prat. Just wait until we're alone. Doesn't he realise Jean was one of the matriarchs of the East End? Everyone knew her and respected her. She was 96 years old and did a lot of work for Papa in her own way. He would have been mortified at Adam showing disrespect like that. He couldn't be bothered to turn up on time, and he couldn't be—" All the way from the cemetery to the East End pub for the wake, Scarlet muttered and complained about Adam's behaviour, while Knuckles carried on driving in silence. He knew better than to answer. Scarlet was just letting off steam, and it was better she did it in the back of the car and had cooled down a bit before she vented her anger at Adam. Along his route, Adam had popped into a shop and picked up a white shirt to wear. When Scarlet saw him dressed more respectfully, she gave him a nod of approval. Adam made his way to the bar and started chatting to everyone, lifting the solemn mood and making people laugh. Everyone liked him and fell under his spell. In their own way, he and Scarlet were comical without realising it. Scarlet always disapproved of Adam's mischievous ways, but melted at his flattery and charm and couldn't stay angry at him for long, while Adam always seemed to be on the wrong end of her temper. Between them, they made a good match. Scarlet leaned closer to Knuckles and whispered, "Knuckles, 2 drinks and we're done. I've a lot of work to do, and I can't hang around all day listening to stories from times gone past, because that's all they're going to do now once they've started drinking. You're going to ring my mobile in half an hour with an emergency. Got it?" Scarlet instructed. "I'll put it on loudspeaker so they can hear. After all, nobody's ever heard you speak, have they?" "What emergency?" Frowning, Knuckles looked at her seriously and waited for an answer. "Does it matter? Just say it's urgent business," she snapped. "For Christ's sake, is this my lot in life, to be surrounded by idiots? Talking of idiots, where's Adam?" "He's over there, carefully listening to stories from times gone past to make the family feel better." Scarlet glared at Knuckles with her piercing blue eyes while detecting the sarcasm in his voice. Although, she had to admit, he was right. Adam was doing exactly what she didn't want to do, paying attention and comforting the many families and friends of the recently deceased Jean. Scarlet excused herself and went to the ladies, and as she did so, Adam sidled up to Knuckles. "Well, how long's she given you before you make the call?"
"Half an hour."
Grinning to himself, Adam walked away to rejoin the others. After 20 minutes, he looked at his watch. Looking across at Scarlet, he saw her do her usual thing of standing near a crowd of people who would hear her mobile and the fake call that would reveal she was needed elsewhere. She'd done it many times before to get herself out of a situation. He grinned at the fact that Scarlet didn't realise they all knew this ploy. Taking out his mobile, he dialed her number and watched her answer her mobile in fake surprise. Turning on the loudspeaker, a deep Scottish accent she didn't know greeted her. "Miss Scarlet, your knickers are on fire. You should come home immediately." Adam laughed and ended the call, musing to himself that he may as well be hung for a sheep as well as a lamb. Blushing, Scarlet turned towards Knuckles and noticed he wasn't holding his mobile. Then she glared across at Adam and knew exactly what he'd done. "Sorry, darlings, it seems I have to leave you," she lied, while waving over to Adam. "We have to leave, Adam. It seems something has cropped up." "Really?" His feigned surprise annoyed her more. "Surely you don't want to rush off this quickly. Show some respect, Scarlet." He threw Scarlet's own words back at her while giving her a cheeky wink. Scarlet couldn't help but smile. "Checkmate, Adam," she laughed. "Sorry, everyone, I have to leave. Apparently, my knickers are on fire. Jimmy," she shouted to the barman, "send the bill for the wake to me, and for Christ's sake break out some champagne and give Jean a good send-off." Everyone cheered and gave her a round of applause, and Jimmy gave her the thumbs up. Linking her arm through Adam's, Scarlet walked towards the door, with Knuckles hot on their heels. Chapter 2. Bits and Pieces. Once back at the club, Adam walked into the office. He knew he'd get there before Scarlet. Her Rolls-Royce, fighting its way through London's busy traffic, wasn't as quick as his motorbike. He looked around him to check the room was empty before shutting the door and taking out his mobile. "Is it done?" he asked.
"Yeah. Mavis has taken it to the police station. Sorted."
"I'll be in touch." Ending the call, Adam could hear the sound of Scarlet's heels walking down the hallway and opened the door to her and Knuckles. "Before you start on me, let me take a shower and get dressed first, eh? It's a shame you didn't get dressed earlier. Where were you?" "Oh, God, don't tell me. Hastily leaving another bimbo's bedroom. Well, as it happens, I want to shower myself, to get rid of the stench of death." Undoing the clasp of her chignon, she let her hair fall down her back and ran her hands through it. Sitting in one of the high-backed leather chairs at the large desk in the office, she kicked off her shoes and put her feet up on the desk. Then she opened one of the drawers and took out a whiskey bottle and 2 glasses. Pouring the whiskey, she held out a glass to Adam. "Oh, I'm shattered. Those things drain me. I'd offer you a drink, Knuckles, but you're driving. There's some Coke in the fridge if you want one." Knuckles shook his head. "OK, let's both go and have a shower after this, and then you can tell me what or who was so important that you were so late, and maybe we can get some business done." "You look done in, Scat. What time did you get to bed last night?" "Or this morning," Adam corrected himself. He knew Scarlet was a workaholic, and last night had been some councillor or MP's party at the club, with Scarlet playing hostess. "About 4 a.m, but it was worth it. All those wonderful members of Parliament and their influential friends. Always keep your enemies close, Adam. They would turn on us at the drop of a hat if things went tits up. But for now, we're friends, which means planning permissions granted and the right introductions to the right people who just might be needed one day. Anyway, Julie was there, and you know she loves to party."
"Oh, my God, no wonder it was late."
Adam laughed. "Anyway, why wasn't Julie at the funeral? If anyone knew Jean, she did. Didn't she used to spy for Ralph?" Raising one eyebrow, Scarlet gave Adam a knowing look. "It's not spying, it's keeping your ear to the ground. There is a difference. Everyone knows Julie doesn't get up before midday." Scarlet wagged a warning finger at Adam. "Don't tell her I said that. She'll have my guts for garters." Adam couldn't stop laughing, although it was true. Everyone still lived in fear of Julie Gold's sharp tongue. "Did she bring her entourage of young men with her and hold court?" "Yes. Did you expect anything else? All 6 of them, waiting on her hand and foot in their tuxedos. Nice-looking young men. She has taste, I'll give her that."
"Yeah, and she pays a fortune for it."
"She has a fortune, Adam. And if surrounding herself with 20-year-old male escorts pleases her, then so be it. She misses Uncle Ralph more than she admits, and has never remarried. The only man she's actually friends with, apart from you, that is Mark, Ralph's old driver. I did wonder about those 2 once, but it's not my business. Come on, let's get showered, and then you can tell me what you've been up to, because I know it's not a woman. The only thing that puts that glint into your pretty blue eyes is business." Adam grinned. "And your pretty blue eyes look tired, Scarlet. Take a nap, and we'll talk later. Now, go and do as you're told." Mavis stood at the desk in the police station. "Excuse me, officer, is this the place for lost property?" she asked. The desk sergeant looked up from his form filling. "Not really, miss, but if you have something, you can hand it in here." Puzzled, he looked her up and down. It was a rarity for someone deep in the heart of London to hand in lost property, but, he mused to himself, stranger things had happened. "I found this bag. Looks expensive. Me and my friend was going over London Bridge, and it looks a bit battered, like it's been run over. But when I looked inside it, it's one of those laptop things. I'm not up to scratch on those things, but my grandson has one. I wondered if anyone had reported it missing." Nearly yawning at the old woman's drawn-out explanation, the desk sergeant tried to be polite. It was indeed a laptop case, and as he looked inside, he saw there was indeed a laptop inside. Investigating further, he could see it was smashed and no good to anyone, but the woman had meant well. "I'll check to see if one has been reported missing. Otherwise, let me take your details, and if it's not collected, you can claim it. Finders keepers," he smiled. "Although, I might say, these days it's not the done thing to open strange bags lying around. You need to be more careful. But thank you. Let's hope it gets to its rightful owner." "Oh, I see what you mean. Bombs and stuff. You see it on the news all the time. I don't want it, so never mind about contacting me. But in my day, you did the right thing, and that was hand things into the police station, be it an old bag or £1,000,000. She smiled and gave a wave as she walked out of the station. The desk sergeant was flabbergasted. No one around here would hand in £1,000,000. Come to think of it, they wouldn't hand in a £10 note. Labelling the bag, he looked at his screen and, true enough, he saw that someone had reported it missing. Picking up the telephone, he dialed the number. "Is that Mr. Williams?" "This is Desk Sergeant Watts. You reported your laptop missing this morning and said you'd picked up the wrong bag. Is that right?" he inquired. The voice on the other end seemed nervous. "Yes, officer, I'd fallen over some tramp, and when I stood up, I picked up a laptop case thinking it was mine. It looked like mine, although a bit battered, but inside wasn't my laptop. It looked like a kid's iPad or something. Broken, of course." "One has just been handed in, sir. A lady says she found it on London Bridge and has brought it here. I've looked inside, and the laptop seems broken, but do you want to come and see if it's yours?" "Absolutely. Can I come now? What police station are you at?" The desk sergeant moved the phone away from his ear as questions were fired at him. The man was jubilant, and the sergeant could hear the excitement and relief in his voice. He informed the caller which police station he was at and quickly ended the call. Raising one eyebrow and putting the phone down, the sergeant felt he'd done his good deed for the day. "Kim! Kim!" Jamie Williams almost danced to his colleague's desk in the office and whispered in her ear, "That was the police. Can you believe it? Someone has handed in my laptop. I'm going there now. Thank God." Holding his hands up in prayer, he looked at his friend with relief. "You're a lucky sir, if it is yours. What have you been doing all morning?" "Trying to get some files together in case mine was lost forever. I was shitting myself. I was going to be sacked for sure. There's so much customer data on that laptop, it's untrue. I seriously wouldn't have wanted to hold my hands up to that." Kim could see the relief in his face. "What condition is it in, have they said?" "Broken, apparently, but that doesn't matter. As long as the hard drive is intact, I can access all of my files. Not a word, Kimmy, not a word." "Next time, you might take a leaf out of all our books and not take your laptop home with you. You can't take data-protected information from the office, and you know that. If that is your laptop, and I hope it is for your sake, you're one lucky bugger. Go on, I'll cover for you." "Oh," she shouted after him as he walked away to leave, "and don't call me Kimmy." Jamie almost fell out of the taxi as it approached the police station and quickly paid the black cab driver with his card. "Blimey, mate, I've never seen so much a place to see a cop shop," the cabbie shouted after him and laughed. Jamie gave his name and presumed it was the same officer he'd spoken to minutes before. After a few moments, the desk sergeant appeared with his battered bag. "It looks exactly like the one you have, sir. Can you identify it as yours?" the sergeant commented. "Yes, of course. Mine has got a Batman logo on the bottom. It's a sticker. I'm a fan," he explained. His rambling bored the sergeant. He'd worked a long shift, and all of this for a piece of broken metal didn't seem worth it. Turning the broken laptop over, he could see it did indeed have a Batman logo on it, just as described.
Well, it looks like it's yours, so I just need you to sign a few things. What about that iPad that was in the case you picked up?
Oh, that was useless. I've brought it with me, but it's broken. Probably. The desk sergeant could see that Mr. Williams was eager and excited over the laptop and realised that whatever was on it was extremely important to him. Jamie signed all the paperwork and hugged the case to his chest. He couldn't believe his luck and felt like punching the air. He swore to himself that he would never take it out of the office again, until next time. He'd had a few late nights lately and had not been concentrating at work, especially since he'd split up with his long-term girlfriend and had to move out. That was why he'd taken his laptop home, so that he could catch up. If his boss ever found out, he would lose his job and his reputation. His life was a mess, and so was his work. Everyone had a laptop and a main computer in case they had to move around the office to different meetings. The main computer didn't contain all of his clients. The ones stored on his laptop were the clients he looked after most, with the most generous of commissions. There was no way he was going to share their details with senior brokers so that they could steal all his hard work. Now, all he had to do was access the hard drive with all of the information he needed to carry on. Sitting at his desk in his large leather chair felt good. Scarlet had insisted he had their father's chair, as he was the only biological son of Tony Lambrianu. There was his older stepbrother Bobby, who Francesca had had from a previous relationship prior to marrying his father. Bobby was a doctor, and a very good one, and was 22 years older than himself. They were close and met up regularly, but as a doctor he was always busy, and lately they'd both let things slide on the visiting department. So here Adam sat, in the office of his father's nightclub, and in his chair. Sometimes he doubted he was good enough to take over the family business. Was he up to his father's standard? Tony Lambrianu had been a legend. This club, Lambrianu's, had been his first ever club, and the one he was most proud of, and where his father's heart had always been. With its lavish pink neon lights lighting up his name outside for all to see, his father had made his mark, and apparently he'd worked night and day with Jake to establish this place. Adam tried hard to remember his father, but he'd only been 9 years old when he died, and Adam's memories were hazy. He'd been a very handsome man, and a ladies' man, by all accounts, until he'd met their mother. His sharp suits, showman ways, and his hot-headed Italian temper were part of his enigmatic personality. But Adam knew his memories were different to Scarlet's, and he remembered a kind, caring man who'd never missed one of Adam's school plays, who'd tried his best to pick him up from school when he could, and who had spoken to him every night on the phone before Adam went to bed. Scarlet and Katie had adored him as their father too, but they'd also got to see him as a brilliant businessman, a part of Tony that Adam had never been privy to. Adam had never been to the club as a child, and so it didn't hold the same sentimental value that it did for Scarlet and Katie. Some days he felt haunted by the huge, as though the great man himself was watching over him, making him feel inadequate at times. Hearing a knock at the door, Adam straightened his tie and awoke from his reverie. "Come in." "There you are, Adam. Your laptop is all fixed and updated." Sitting the laptop on his desk before him, Adam smiled at the tech wizard Bruce, and they both burst out laughing. "There are a few others with the same data, Adam. Everyone is in place, just waiting for your say-so." "I haven't spoken to Scarlet yet, Bruce. As my business partner, she needs to know about this. She will disapprove, of course, that is her way, but she needs to be informed. Who have we got as watchers?" "Well, first we have Norman. He's a bit simple, but he's a good guy, although he has a prison record as long as your arm. Mostly petty theft and a failed cannabis farm, and then there's the matter of him still being out of prison on licence because he murdered his wife. But he's in his 70s now, and got nothing to do but sit indoors and look out the window. And the good news is, he doesn't even know what he's looking at. All he knows is to watch that computer on that page and let me know if the prices go up or down. The guy can hardly read, let alone make out those figures, and no one ever goes into his house because he's a little lax on hygiene." "He seems ideal. How did you find him?" "Those dealers from Liverpool I told you about. They used to work with us until they all got banged up at His Majesty's hotels. They all put his name forward, and I went and spoke to him. He smells a bit, but when I told him his friends had said he could help me, he listened. Didn't know what the hell I was talking about, which is good for us, but agreed, as long as we oiled his palms. He doesn't want money, though. He wants goods." Puzzled, Adam looked up at Bruce. "Goods? What kind of goods?" "Shopping, fags, and he needs a new television because his is knackered. He would also like someone to help clear his garden because the council have complained about the mess and the height of the grass." "You're fucking kidding me. Is that it? Adam couldn't believe his ears. No one did that kind of work for a bit of shopping. Bruce shook his head. I also think if we do drop him a few quid now and again, he will be eternally grateful. Told you he wasn't the full ticket, although maybe he's not so stupid when you think about it. Adam couldn't believe his ears. Most people asked for thousands of pounds, but apparently not this Norman man. Well, I liked working with the Liverpudlians. They were good, honest thieves and dealers. If they recommend him, that's good enough for me. What about the others? Even better, Adam. There's a nurse not far from Norman. Poor cow hasn't got a penny to scratch her ass with. She wants to buy her council house, because the mortgage is cheaper than the rent, and as she's getting on a bit, she'd like a bit of security. Her house has 3 bedrooms, and sooner or later the council are going to ask her to downsize to a 1-bedroom flat. She's no family to speak of, except a daughter who never visits. If she had a bit of a deposit stuffed under her mattress, she's a couple of thousand short at the moment, then the bank would let her have the mortgage. She knows her way around a keyboard, and she's more to lose than us. A disgraced nurse going to jail? She'd never get another job. She'd lose her home. Adam had his misgivings about the nurse, but was prepared to listen. The other 2 are much the same. Some woman who's had a mini-stroke and has only been given domiciliary carers twice a day from the council. She'd like someone there on a more permanent basis, like a live-in carer. And there are a lot of illegal immigrants out there with nowhere to live, prepared to do it. They get an address, and she gets a carer. I know it sounds bleak, Adam, but all they have to do is watch a computer and do what we tell them, and we answer all their prayers. And then, of course, there's your friendly accountant, who knows more about money laundering than we do. Katie and her husband Chris were both accountants by trade and kept a close eye on the business's books. Let's leave our accountant out of this for now. Bruce nodded, knowing the conversation was coming to a close. Of course. By the way, how did it go this morning? Was Scarlet angry because you were running late? I have to say, Adam, today worked like a charm. It was a genius stroke to have that bloke followed for weeks and then for you to hook up with his girlfriend. She certainly gave you a lot of pillow talk. Thanks to her, we knew he took his laptop home and exactly what was on it. I presume you've given her the brush off now. Shaking his head, Adam smiled. I haven't given her the brush off yet, actually. She had valuable information to share and very loose lips, telling me about her partner making millions in cryptocurrency, but I made it clear that I'm not into relationships, just a good time and a bit of fun. It's up to her if she wants to carry on seeing me, as I've made my feelings clear. She's not the kind of woman for me. She has far too much to say. Well, thankfully, that dick of yours impressed her enough. I agree she let her mouth run away with her, but that's her problem, and his. He's obviously let her see him squirreling away on his laptop about his clients and what he does at the stock exchange. Anyway, what about old Pete, the retired bingo caller? Do you think he could be a watcher for us? Adam shook his head. Pete likes life on the inside too much. He has more friends inside prison than he has on the outside. No sooner does he come out than he pinches a packet of biscuits to get himself arrested again. He attracts too much attention. Although there is someone with time on their hands who I would trust with my life. What about Knuckles? Adam looked up at his friend Bruce and saw the frown appear on his brow. You ask him if you want to, but leave me out of it. He's one scary monster. Makes King Kong look like a midget. He never smiles and stares right through you like an undertaker measuring you up. And you'll have to see what Scarlet says. See what Scarlet says about what? Refreshed and wearing a pink cashmere dress with matching shoes, Scarlet glided into the room with her hair down, showing off just a little of her diamond earrings. Shocked at her sudden presence, Adam and Bruce stared at each other for a moment, and then back at Scarlet, who'd now pulled out her chair and sat waiting for an explanation. Let's have it. Picking up her gold cigarette holder and putting a cigarette in it, she lit it and blew the smoke into the air. Money laundering, said Adam. We launder enough money, Adam. Too much sometimes. So what makes your idea any better? Frowning, she waited. Clearing his throat, Adam stared directly at her. Don't treat me like a fool, Scarlet. Yeah, I'm the younger brother, but I have the same scheming blood in my veins as you. I've done my homework. I have the data, and now all I have to do is move things around a little. It's crypto money, digital wallets, just numbers on bits of paper to most people, unless you know what you're doing, and I do. What are you on about, Adam? Cryptocurrency. I've seen and heard about it, but it's useless. People want cash in their pockets, not bits of paper with numbers and figures. How are you going to launder money with it? Scarlet laughed at Adam's attempt at being the businessman, although, truth be told, she wasn't quite up to scratch with cryptocurrencies and didn't want to show it. She took another drag of her cigarette. "That's because you're a dinosaur, Scarlet," Adam snapped. "How many people down the supermarket do you see paying in cash? They all use plastic, and that's just numbers on a screen. It's all plastic and digital now, Scarlet. This is the 21st century, and we have to move with the times. That's where I was this morning. I've acquired what I need to begin with. I'll start small, and there will be no suspicions because I've been playing the market for a couple of months already now." Scarlet glared at Adam, and then at Bruce. "You can fuck off now, Bruce. You're not needed here. I wish to speak to my brother alone." Turning to look at Scarlet, Bruce blushed slightly. He could see the way her sapphire blue eyes were darkening, which meant she was nearly at boiling point. It was definitely time to leave. Turning towards Adam, he nodded and left. Standing up, Scarlet shut the door and walked over to her brother. For a moment they both paused and looked at each other defiantly. With one swing of her hand, Scarlet slapped him across the face, making Adam jerk backwards. Rubbing his cheek, he sat up again. "Don't ever call me a dinosaur in front of your prick friends again. Do you hear me?" she shouted angrily. Realizing his mistake, and rubbing the burning sensation on his cheek, he nodded. Her harsh slap had almost made his eyes water, but he was determined not to show it. "Now pour me a drink and explain this idea of yours sensibly without insulting me," she snapped and sat down. Her own hand felt hot and was stinging. She hadn't meant to hit him so hard, but sometimes her temper got the better of her. Once Adam had poured them both a drink, the mood seemed to lift slightly, and he welcomed the warm whiskey down his throat. "Someone mentioned cryptocurrency to me, and then one of our business suppliers mentioned it too. In different countries it's used a lot, and we're way behind here in the UK. But our drug suppliers have mentioned it in passing a couple of times, which is why I looked into it. A lot of cash is hard to dispose of in some countries without suspicion, and so they transfer it to Bitcoin. Or rather, whoever owes the money, inflation goes up and down, and people want to sell so as not to lose money. You can also cash your shares in for real cash. That way, it looks legal and above board. Dare I say it, Scarlet, our drug suppliers use it a lot. It saves them burying it in their back gardens." Puzzled but intrigued, Scarlet took a sip of her whiskey and leaned forward. "But is that all it's used for? It seems like a worthless investment if so." "No, it's not. It's growing and becoming more common. A lot of people take it as currency now. You can buy Rolex, limousines, and although Amazon don't take it directly, they can put you onto the supplier that does." "Come on, Scat, all we're doing is cutting out the middleman and buying direct. There is a commission to pay, but there's a price to pay on all the money you spend, isn't there?" "So, if we pay a commission, Adam, how do we make money?" Scarlet asked. Mentally, she knew this digital world wasn't her hottest topic, and mused to herself that maybe to the younger generations she was a dinosaur. "We don't use our own money. We don't sell our own shares." Adam winked and grinned at her. He could see he had captured Scarlet's interest, and the idea of not spending her own money pleased her. "Fernando, our friendly supplier, mentioned that we should use Bitcoin because it's easier to get rid of and lighter to carry." Adam laughed. "Anyway, when he said that, I did my research. I bought a few shares, nothing major, just £1,000 to try it and watch the market go up and down. The same with any stocks and shares. People buy and sell when the time is right." "Yeah, I got that bit, but how do we not use our money? Tell me the important part, the interesting part." Scarlet wanted Adam to get to the point, the money-making point. "Patience, Scat. After all, it is a virtue." He grinned. "Stockbrokers. They have clients and act on their behalf. Well," he scoffed, "the rich and famous do, not Joe Bloggs, dabbling for a few quid. But the rich have realised it's a good way to launder their own money. Stockbrokers act for them and buy and sell when the time is right. But to be able to do that, and here's the interesting bit, Scarlet." Flashing a smile, he paused. "The stockbrokers have to keep a lot of data."